most recently, a couple years ago, a woman disappeared. I believe it was in Arkansas, and she was eventually found. And she said, for 3 days, I knew that there were people behind bushes that were watching me the entire time, and they didn't help me. And I walked up to them sometimes and tried to talk to them, but they wouldn't talk to me.
My 2-year-old son, we can't find him. How long has he been missing? About 4.
There was a hunter in Colorado that contacted me a couple years ago, and he was hunting for elk at about 10 or 11,000 feet up in northern Colorado. And he said he was walking on a plain where the grass was maybe 4 feet high, 3 or 4 feet, and he heard something coming towards him, and he couldn't really identify it. And he kept walking. He got on a trail, and he kept hearing a loud hum. And he started to slow down on the trail, and he said in front of him it became real blurry. So he slowed down even more. It was almost like you were looking through glasses that weren't yours, and it was just strange looking. He said he almost walked up to it, and it looked like a plate of glass, and he stuck his foot through, and part of his foot disappeared. And he said, I brought my foot back, and I turned around, and I ran. There's a story I wrote about where a small boy, 3 years old, was up near Mount Shasta. And he was camping with his grandma and grandpa and parents. He disappeared. He was gone for about 12 hours. The boy came back and told the story that he was held in an underground cavern, and there were robots in the room, and that somebody that looked like grandma was taking care of him. And he said that he thought it was grandma until he saw sparks coming out of her head, and that he had seen old-time guns and things on a ledge around the outside of the cavern. Well, originally, I got a notification from a national park ranger that he had worked at a series of national parks, and they had an unusual amount of disappearances, and the people had disappeared in unusual places that really didn't make a lot of sense to this person. And over the years, they tried to do a little research and figure out what happened, and they got stymied. And the more they looked into it, into their internal system, he got concerned that there wasn't enough being done. And eventually ended up contacting me when I was at a park doing some peripheral research. And we started to look into disappearances in the U.S. National Park system. Probably the first case that brought my interest was a case of Stacy Harris that disappeared in Yosemite. A 14-year-old girl that was on a pack train ride into Sunrise Lakes into the High Sierra area of Yosemite. Her and her dad stopped at a series of cabins. She got off her horse, freshened up, and her and a 70-year-old man named Stuart went and took a short walk off to this bluff, and she brought her camera, and they were going to just take pictures. The trail hands saw them walk over there, and she walked away from Stuart and told Stuart she was going to walk down to a lake to take some pictures. And the trail hand and Stuart saw her walk down there, and that was the last time she was ever seen. Subsequent search found the lens cap to her camera right inside the tree line of that area. But the reality is they never found a trace of her after that. I filed a series of Freedom of Information Act requests against the Park Service to get documents, and I have received documents before from the Park Service on other missing persons cases. I got a call from their attorney asking me why I wanted the case, and then they asked me what I was going to do with it. And finally, a special agent from the Park Service, a guy named Yu, told me I would never get that case. He didn't explain why, but he said, you're never going to get it. Well, it doesn't make a lot of sense because the Park Service is a big bureaucracy, and I'm sure that they have policies and procedures. And depending on which park you call on or you make the request through, you'll get reports on missing people. And a missing persons case isn't a criminal case, it's a missing person. And most agencies want publicity about missing people. It appears that the Park Service doesn't want publicity about their missing people. In this one instance, the park failed to comply and said that I would never get that case, and to this date, I don't have that case. You know, I've talked to family members of Stacy's. They are equally concerned. They've read my books. They've read the stories. They said that their dad had compiled a massive amount of documents, and he was concerned. And an uncle of theirs called me and said the same thing and said it just didn't make sense. There were a lot of rumors that, hey, she may have walked out of the park. All of this was not true. She completely disappeared. When I talk talked to Agent Yu on the phone. I asked him, were there any suspects? Is this continuing to be investigated? He told me that no one's touched the case for years. There are no suspects, and there's no way that it's going to get turned into a criminal case as far as he knew. Originally, we focused on just the United States, and slowly, as the word got out what we were doing.
Okay, guys, I'm going to stop it there. Those were a few very cool ones that I really like. But I just wanted to come through with some of my own here. Well, not my own, but a couple stories that I thought you guys would like. And the first one is a very unique story I found on a YouTube channel that no longer exists. But the guy was reading close calls. And so the case of this woman is that she was walking down this road, and she was out on a hike. She was by herself, or she was with one other person. It's been so long since I can't find the video, but I want to document it for just the sake of having it documented, because it's a cool story. And anyways, she's walking on this path or trail that she's hiked many times before, and this is on the East Coast in a wooded area. And she's walking and she sees this sign that's like a yield sign, and it seems out of place, but yet as she looks at it, she finds it just kind of like it's glistening, like it's just sparkling, and it just kind of catches her fancy. She's like, well, that's weird. You know, I guess if anyone would ever have like been intoxicated with like some kind of hallucinogen, I'm imagining it's something kind of like that. And but just sectioned off, like you don't completely lose it. Anyways, so this sign is right next to a neat little path she hadn't seen. How many times have we heard this story? So she starts off down the path, and of course, as she gets about 3/4 of the way down where she wanted to go, all of a sudden she starts asking herself, what am I doing here? Why am I here? Why am I taking this path that looked good and now it's turning into nothing? And at that very moment, she said she got this sense that something eerie was watching her, that same old feeling, and I believe God gave us a kind of extra sense for this kind of thing, so we could pick up on spiritual signatures, but I digress. So she senses this, and this woman makes a choice that I think saved her life. She said she picked one direction and walked. And that's what I would suggest to anyone. Of course, pray if you're ever in this situation. But after all my research, after everything I've done, that's the one thing I've noticed that people that do okay do. They don't make a lot of turns. And whatever they're doing, messing with anyone, it seems that if you just walk straight, you won't get caught up in the maze. But anyways, so she was walking and basically just trying to get away from whatever this thing is. And she walks, and she finds herself in a field, and she knows there's no field in this area. This is a wooded area. Well, this sounds like the Tuath Danann, the fairies of old, and their other world, in their outer world. And in future videos, I'm going to get into where I think these people go, because in my studies, I really think I figured it out. And I could be wrong, but I think it's a spiritual holding cell of places created by fallen beings for other fallen beings, kind of like a jail made by inmates for worse inmates than them, and things like that, and that they're able to play tricks on us using these dimensions and portals. Also, something I wanted to note is in 1907, Aleister Crowley performed some awful type satanic sex ritual magic. He was raping little boys. The guy was just a dirtbag, but he claimed to have released some terrible entities into our reality, and it would seem that since early 1900s, I mean 10 years later after he said that, 10 years almost to the day, World War I started, you know. And if you go back and look at some of the stuff with Albert Pike, a lot of things have been planned out. But I digress again. So she pushes through the field, gets to the other end, and says that she feels like her eyes were burning right before she got out. Now I find that interesting because a fairy must make eye contact with you to get control of your brain. And it seems like this lady, that's the only thing that didn't happen, because she had the logic to pick a direction and just go straight, whereas other people's minds are so confused and so scrambled by whatever the entity is sending the frequency into their brain. They're too confused, or they do a situation like kick off all their shoes and everything and find themselves out in the middle of the rainforest with no shoes and, just all bad. No clothes and no phone and just nothing. So she pushes through and she walks through this field that she doesn't recognize, comes across the other side, crosses a road, and finally she feels like that sense of that thing that hated her and the feeling of a frequency pounding her and the itching of the eyes all went away. Now, what David Politis has discovered is that the date rape drug is commonly found in the abducted. Interesting, huh? And so, I think it's called, I can't, you guys know what it is, but either way, I found it interesting as to maybe some small entity actually misted her eyes, or maybe she walked through kind of a veil of mist, and that's how these things are getting people. Now, you just heard the story Politis just said earlier in this video about the man that was walking and actually saw the portal, which makes sense in a lot of other cases where it seems like a person sees something interesting, they take a step, and they're gone. Well, that would make sense. It seems like she would have fallen off the cliff, but she stepped into a portal. And the only reason any of this works is because everyone relegates these types of things to the science fiction right away. And there you go, that was Hollywood's plan. That was Satanic Hollywood's plan the entire time. So, I hope I didn't cut into that last story too much with my opinions. This seems like a good video. Hope you guys like it. Like I said, I'm going to be back with some really interesting stuff. Trying to get back to the origin of all this and where I really think it is. And we're going to get into some Irish. We're going to get into the Irish Triangle and missing people there. And the mythology of Ireland and Scotland. And all the crazy stuff. Because I really think this 4-in-1 thing goes back there somehow, some way. I don't know. Anyways, you guys are the best. Thanks to all my 3 subscribers. Please help me get more. I do want more. And I just like sharing stories with you guys. Thanks for all your comments. They're really nice, and they keep me going.